My name is Karen Smith. My husband and I have been married for 5 years, and we don't have any children. Initially, I really wanted kids and mentioned it to my husband, but he said with a kind smile, "Don't you think we should enjoy some more time just the two of us?" That made sense to me, so I ended up spending these 5 years as he suggested. Then, I received the shocking news that my childhood friend, Monica, had suddenly passed away. Monica and I were always together since we were kids, so her unfortunate news plunged me into deep sorrow. I contacted my husband to tell him about Monica and said that we should attend the wake right away. However, he said, "I'll go. You should prioritize your work." Actually, his words were really appreciated. I hold a quite important position, and taking time off work wasn't easy. "Thank you, I'm counting on you," I said, entrusting everything to my husband, but I kept being reminded of Monica even while working. It was around the time I got married. Monica revealed that she was pregnant with her then boyfriend's child. Monica, who wasn't married and was dedicated to her job, brightly said she wouldn't marry but would bravely be a single mother when I asked about her plans. But isn't it extremely tough to raise a child alone? If I get married, I won't be able to focus on my job. But still, isn't raising a child alone just as demanding, if not more? I'd rather that than have my time taken by a husband. She firmly refused to reveal the father's identity. 10 months later, Monica gave birth. As someone without children, I visited Monica's condo countless times to see the little angel. Sometimes, my husband even picked up her child from daycare when Monica couldn't make it in time. There were times when the child fell sick, and whoever could take leave would care for the child. Of course, Monica's parents helped too, but my husband and I often took the lead in taking care of the child. That's why I couldn't think of Monica's son, Hayden, as just someone else's child. I wonder if everything's okay. I left it to him, but there's probably a lot to do at a funeral. There must be many things that need help. Thinking this, I managed to finish work and told my boss I'd be taking the next day off. I went home, changed into my morning clothes, and headed for the funeral home. On the way, the overwhelming sadness made my chest tight. If I feel this bad, how much pain must little Hayden be in? When I arrived at the funeral home, the service was in progress. I looked for my husband, but he was nowhere to be seen. Where could he be? Then, I froze in shock. There was my husband, sitting in the chief mourner's seat, with little Hayden beside him. I couldn't understand what was happening and just returned to my seat, baffled. Even if they were close, it didn't make sense for him to be in the chief mourner's seat. Was he sitting there because the child was anxious? But even with Monica's parents present, it seemed odd for him to take such a role. What's going on? Why is he in the chief mourner's seat? As I watched my husband intently, he was embracing little Hayden's small shoulder. He occasionally wiped Hayden's tears and then his own, looking unmistakably like a husband who had lost his wife. Thinking back, my husband Stephen's way of interacting with Hayden did seem different from how one would with someone else's child. He always talked to him with tender eyes, as if cherishing his own son. He was the first to rush to the hospital when Hayden was born, often choosing baby clothes and gifts himself. He changed diapers more than once or twice. It was also Stephen who prepared and fed him milk. Watching my husband do all this, I thought he'd be a loving and great dad when we had our own kids. Yet, 2 years passed, and then 3, and Stephen still didn't want children between us. He always said, "Karen, you're in an important position, and you shouldn't neglect your work for kids." I believe that women, even if capable, should prioritize their career. He never changed his mind about children. Did Stephen not want kids with me? That thought haunted me. But now, Stephen looks every bit the dad. Why? The word affair involuntarily came to mind. If that was the case, when did it start? If Hayden is Stephen's child, then their relationship must have begun when we were married. Why? How? Questions swirled in my mind, making it hard to breathe. I approached Monica's coffin and spoke to her. "Monica, what's going on? What was your relationship with Stephen? Tell me, Monica." "It's just..." Losing my dear friend and now facing the reality of possibly losing my husband too, I felt overwhelmed. Night fell, I finally entered the reception room. There was Stephen, stroking sleeping Hayden's head, looking down in sorrow. Indeed, he appeared to be a husband grieving his lost wife. I approached him, and noticing me, he looked up. "Why did you come?" His voice was weak, almost accusing me of being there. "I've been here the whole time. Since the beginning." "Really? I didn't notice. What's going on? What do you mean? Why were you in the chief mourner's seat?" Stephen's gaze shifted from me to Hayden, stroking his head sadly. Poor kid. Losing his mom, such a small child sitting alone. True, but that didn't mean Stephen should have been there. "Monica's parents are here. They should have been in that seat. It's strange for a stranger like you to sit there. You looked like Monica's husband." "It doesn't matter what others think. That's not the point. That seat is for the chief mourner. You're my husband and just a friend to Monica, right?" "Why bring this up now?" "What? Is this really the time for this?" "She's gone, you know? Hayden's all alone now." "He's not alone. Monica's parents are here. You just don't understand." Saying that, he hugged the sleeping Hayden, looking distressed. My mind kept repeating, this is wrong, strange, impossible. Faced with Stephen's unusual demeanor, I blurted out something I shouldn't have. "Are you and this child related?" "What?" "You both look like father and son. How could that be?" I've been around since he was born. He doesn't feel like a stranger." Just then, Hayden woke up. Tear-streaked, he looked at Stephen. "Daddy, where's Mom?" "Mom's gone, buddy." "I want to see Mommy." "Daddy's here." "What? Why does he call you Daddy? Is he your son?" At that moment, Monica's parents came and took Hayden away. Sleepy-eyed, Hayden cried out, "No, Dad. Let's go home with Mom," as he reached out his hand, but he was taken to another room. "What's the meaning of this? Hey, why did he call you Dad?" No matter how many times I asked, Stephen just kept his head down in silence. Realizing this was going nowhere, I said, "Fine, if you won't talk, I'll get a DNA test." A DNA test would clarify whether Hayden is Stephen's child. That would define where my relationship with Stephen stood. "She was my mistress," Stephen muttered quietly. "What, mistress?" "Yes. She was my mistress." His sudden anger left me speechless. Even though I had denied the possibility of an affair, Stephen shattered everything with just a few words. "Mistress, you're saying?" "Well, she's not in this world anymore, so that's that." "What does that mean?" "I'll explain everything after the funeral." With that, Stephen left the wake. Stephen served as the chief mourner and tearfully gave a speech. Everyone there was moved, but his confession of having a mistress overpowered my grief with anger, leaving no room for tears. After everything ended, I returned home first. I sat on the sofa, still in my mourning clothes. When Stephen finally returned after sending off Monica, he sat down in front of me, looking tired. "Thanks for coming to the funeral. She must have been happy about it." "Well, I wonder about that. Now, can you explain what's going on?" "Yeah, as I said yesterday, she was my mistress. That's all there is to it." "Since when? When did you start this affair?" 6 years ago. 6 years ago? That's before we were married. How did you even end up in this situation? What connection did you have with Monica?" "You introduced her to me right after we met, remember? You said she was your best friend. That's when I thought she was the one. We were supposed to go out for drinks, the three of us, but you had sudden work and couldn't make it. So, it ended up being just the two of us. That was the start." "You mean, you were two-timing?" "Yeah, I guess so. I didn't intend to, but I loved both of you and couldn't choose." "And the child? Who's Hayden's father?" "He's my son." "Your son? Monica and your child?" "Yes, that's right." "Why didn't you marry her?" I proposed to her before I proposed to you, but she turned me down. She didn't want to get married. That's why I married you. But it was after we got married that I found out Hayden was on the way. So that means... Yes, I thought if she was going to have my child, I'd marry her. I wanted to tell you everything. But she said she couldn't do that to you, so there was nothing I could do. And that's why you were so fond of Hayden? Yeah. He's cute. He's my own child, so of course I love him more than anyone. That's why I told you I was working late, but I was actually visiting her. So Hayden thinks you're his dad? Yes, I've acknowledged him legally. How could you? So you didn't want children with me because of Hayden? Yes, exactly. I was paying child support for him every month. I couldn't afford to have another child. I'm sorry, but I just thought we didn't need kids. Sorry, it doesn't cut it. You've made 2 women unhappy. You can't just say sorry. I agree. So, what are you going to do now? Nothing will change for me. Not change? Even if you don't change, I can't just carry on like this. What do you mean? After finding out about this, I've been betrayed since before our marriage. I can't just continue being your wife, especially knowing you didn't want children with me because you had a child with someone else. It's despicable. Whatever you say, I'm the one at fault. I know that. We're getting a divorce. I can't even think about staying married to you. Get out. Get out. Of course. Leave and live as his father. Monica didn't want that. Whatever Monica wanted doesn't matter. It's about whether I can forgive you. Who could forgive this? But if I leave, I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem. You've had your way with 2 women. It's about time you suffered a little. You have no idea how much I've suffered these past 2 days. I don't even want to see your face anymore. I understand. I'm sorry. You're right. I am Hayden's father. I'll live as his father from now on. I'll send the divorce papers later. I'll be demanding a fair settlement for alimony. Be prepared. I understand. Stephen left the house, shoulders slumped. Later, he went to Monica's parents. I'm sorry for your loss. Monica had a hard time raising Hayden alone, and you kept her in the shadows. Yes, you're right. That's why I'm planning to take responsibility as Hayden's father now. What? That's ridiculous. What? That child is our grandson. Do you think just because Monica passed away, you can just take him? You think we're going to hand over Monica's only legacy to you? But he's my son. Don't act so high and mighty just because you acknowledged him. Acknowledging him is the least you could do. I wanted you to marry her when I found out she was pregnant. She refused. I know. But she didn't want to make herself happy by breaking up your marriage. She always cried, saying she felt sorry for Karen. I didn't know that. Playing 2 women at the same time, thinking you could just choose one. While you were with one, you proposed to Monica. She would never accept that. She was always crying, feeling sorry for Karen. Was she? Not understanding people's feelings, and now you want to be Hayden's father? Enough with your jokes, please. But now that Karen and I are divorcing, I don't have to worry about her anymore. So just because you're divorced, that's okay? Now you're going to make Karen cry? Don't you realize how hard it was for her to attend the funeral? Maybe, but Hayden needs a father. We don't need a half-hearted man like you. We were against letting you sit in the chief mourner's seat. You insisted on it, even knowing Karen would be there. I'm sorry. Seeing you sitting in the chief mourner's seat, what do you think Monica would have thought? Knowing Karen would be there and still selfishly insisting on being the chief mourner. You don't consider anyone's feelings. You just do whatever you want. But Hayden calls me Dad. Even if a small child calls you Dad, there's something called common sense. You were a stranger, you had no business sitting in that seat. But you kept insisting. Imagine how hard it was for us, losing our daughter and dealing with your stubbornness. I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. No, you weren't thinking of what was right, just being selfish. You never think about others, just imposing your own feelings. We can't trust Hayden with someone like you. We'll raise him. Just send the child support every month until he graduates from college. That's your responsibility as a parent. Can I see Hayden, please? There's no way I'd let you. You made Monica unhappy. I don't recognize you as his father. I see. You're right. Maybe I did make her unhappy. Not maybe, you did. Understood. I have one thing to ask. What is it? Did you really love Monica? Of course. I would have married her if I could. I see. Then show that love in action. In action? She struggled on her own without asking anyone for help. Balancing work and child-rearing was tough, and sure, she leaned on you and your wife's support occasionally. But what was even harder was the money. Raising a child alone costs a lot. Yet she never once asked her parents for help, working tirelessly, sparing no time for rest. That strain is what took her from this world. Was that the case? But I was paying child support every month. That wasn't nearly enough. She ended up in debt without us knowing. She was struggling that much. That debt will now fall on Hayden. What? He can just renounce the inheritance, can't he? How could you suggest such a shameful thing? If you renounce the inheritance, it would be a disgrace to Monica. If you truly loved her, you couldn't say that. Right. If you had lived together, none of this would have happened. Yes, you're right. So you need to pay off the debt left to Hayden. What? Not what? Of course, you should. You've had your fun, now it's time to pay your dues. Yes, you're right. I understand. So, how much is the debt? I don't know. She's gone, so we have to ask the lenders. Right. Calling this number should tell you. They handed me the consumer loan company's number. Stephen promised to pay off the debt and left Monica's parents' house. Later, he called the loan company to express his desire to repay Monica's debt. After hearing the total amount, Stephen called me, shocked. What? I've already signed and submitted the divorce papers. No, it's not about that. It's about Monica. What about Monica? She had debt. Really? Why? Her mother said it was for raising the child. I see. If we don't do anything, the debt will pass on to Hayden, so I've decided to pay it. Right. As his father, it's only natural. Yeah. The amount is just exorbitant. Exorbitant? How much? $160,000. $160,000? Why so much? I wondered why it was so high and asked what it was for. But they said they couldn't disclose it to anyone but the person involved. Well, that makes sense. Why did she have to borrow so much? I have an idea why. But you don't understand, do you? What do you mean? Just look at Monica's belongings, you'll understand. I can't. Her mother won't let me into her apartment. She said I made her unhappy, and I shouldn't touch her things ever again. I can understand her feelings. Tell me, why did she borrow so much? Does raising a child really cost that much? Even for a child, $160,000 is way too much. Yeah, I think so too. Monica always had a thing for brands. What? That's why her apartment was filled with expensive bags and clothes. She showed them to me every time she bought something. To afford all that, you need a lot of money. I had no idea. That's why she said she didn't want to marry because she'd lose her financial freedom. Is that so? And she was big on impulse buying. Really? She often bought more for herself than for her child. I went shopping with her a few times. If she wanted something, she bought it immediately. I asked if it was okay not to buy things for her child, and she just laughed, saying second-hand stuff was good enough for kids who outgrow things so quickly. No way! I'm not lying. So, I have to keep paying for her extravagances? And child support too? That's not my problem. It's your own doing. But I never imagined her debt was for such things. Monica was a big spender and a show-off. Whenever we went out to eat, she always treated me, and we would go to fancy restaurants. I thought she had a good income because we always ate delicious food, so I happily accepted her treats. But it turns out, all that was on borrowed money. Classic Monica. Wait, does that mean some of her debt went to you indirectly? In a way. Then you should pay too. At least for what you benefited from her. Why should I have to pay? If Monica asked me to pay her back, I would, but she can't speak anymore, can she? Or are you going to bring her back from the afterlife? That's impossible. Then just give up. Oh, and I sent an invoice to your parents' house. What invoice? For the alimony from our divorce. How much? $600,000. For everything you've done, it hardly seems enough. I'm not satisfied, but well, it can't be helped. That's what the lawyer said. All that? With Monica's part, it's more than $2 million. Yes. But Monica's debt has nothing to do with me. You need to pay the $600,000 in full. That's impossible. That's not my problem. You owe me alimony for all the trouble you've caused. But it's for 6 years of marriage, including before we got married. Honestly, I should be asking for double. That's ridiculous. Then I should have stayed married to you. What? Too late for that. If we didn't divorce, there'd be no alimony, and we could have paid off the debt together. What are you talking about? I told you earlier. I've already submitted the divorce papers. That means you and I are officially strangers now. So, could you please stop contacting me? Don't say that. We could remarry, right? Don't joke around. You've done enough, now suffer the consequences. Karen, please help me. Hearing Stephen's pitiful voice, I finally felt satisfied hanging up the phone. Well, what happened next? To pay me in full, Stephen also went through a consumer loan company and borrowed $60,000. He thought borrowing from a bank would be better, but with the $160,000 he had to repay, the total amount becoming $220,000 didn't seem much different to him. As a result, he ended up with a debt of $220,000, plus a monthly child support payment of $1,000. He considered moving back to his parents' house to save on living expenses. But his parents wouldn't have it. They were furious that he had not taken responsibility for his secret child and caused me, his lawful wife, so much pain. He tried to take responsibility, but Monica's parents had refused him, and his parents didn't believe such a thing could happen. To cut down on his living expenses, he moved into a small, affordable studio apartment for around $400 a month. After moving, Stephen contacted me. Hey, I managed to rent a decent place. Want to come see? A studio apartment, huh? Well, that's probably just right for a single guy. But I didn't need to see it to know that next door was a cemetery. Which explained the low rent. So, he started living there, seemingly content. Besides his day job, he took on a night shift and worked extra on weekends. It turns out he hardly ever spends time in his apartment due to his busy schedule. Even with the cemetery next door, it didn't seem to bother him. When I saw him recently, he was terribly thin, a shadow of the man he used to be. I even jokingly asked if he was haunted. As for me, I returned to my parents' home, living a comfortable life. And to forget about Stephen, I'm diving into a new romance, enjoying my newfound happiness to the fullest.